why the Chinese government felt obliged to do this. If you ask the Chinese government, we have citations to the relevant discussion in here. It's the apparently long overdue response to a discussion at a UN conference in the early 1990s about the importance of having national human rights action plans in institutions. The more popular explanation, or the more widely held explanation, was that this was the Chinese government's answer to a lot of the criticism that had been leveled at it during its first ever Universal Periodic Review appearance in February of 2009. It's our view that this really was a vehicle for blunting precisely that kind of criticism, particularly international criticism. If you read the document, I think particularly through a Chinese political lens, it was not really meant in a lot of ways for a domestic audience. Our ultimate assessment really is that the action plan has failed to deliver on key commitments, particularly with respect to civil and political rights, and it's hard not to conclude that the document was primarily a public relations exercise. As I mentioned earlier, during the same period the NHRAP has been in effect, we have watched the Chinese government deliberately, systematically, and overtly violate some of the most basic human rights there are. We can talk more about what specifically those include, but one is a little bit skeptical about the intentions behind the pieces of paper. The two things that encourage us about the document, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, the discussion that led into its creation. There is some good language in the document about ongoing efforts of poverty alleviation, and it's hard not to be reasonably commend the Chinese government for its efforts to lift people out of poverty, although we all know that the statistics that get offered up are debatable, that inequality has been on the rise, and that NHRAP spells out. And those range from ongoing problems with respect to torture, illegal detention, the lack of due process, basic freedoms about expression, association, assembly, the rights of minorities, and other issues. To us, one of the other problematic aspects of the NHRAP was also that it left out a discussion of some of the issues that are of enormous importance, we think, to ordinary Chinese people. There's virtually no discussion in the document, for example, about the discriminatory nature of the hukou system. And if you went out and asked 300 million Chinese migrant workers what their biggest problem was, it's hard to imagine they would say something else. There's almost no discussion in the document about things like forced evictions or property disputes. And so to make practical recommendations about how to fix problems, we actually have come to the conclusion that rather than simply throwing up our hands or asking the Chinese government not to try doing this again, that to rerun the discussion and form a commission that involved both people from the key agencies that were involved in drafting the document in the first place, but also included some of the kinds of scholars and lawyers who are critical of the government but respected both inside and out of it, to review the NHRAP's work and possibly to draft another version of this document that had a little bit more ground reality in it and perhaps set out some more realistic objectives about what could be accomplished, would be a worthwhile exercise to undertake. Hey guys.